the work we've been looking at on soybean inoculant work, seed treatments in soybeans, and then looking at seeding rates, comparing different seeding rates and different seed treatments to see, what the optimal seeding rate plus the seed treatments would be. On the inoculant work we've been doing, me and Dr. Trent Roberts have been looking at this for the last several years. When we first started looking at it, we really didn't see a big impact in the inoculants that we were looking at. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, we were delayed in getting one of the locations planted, and we saw a trend that with those later plantings, we were seeing increases in yield with the use of inoculant compared to untreated seed. So right now our current recommendation is anything planted after May 15th. That's kind of a big change over the recommendations we've had the last 20 or 30 years. And so working with several county agents and working with their growers, we tried to get most everything planted after May 15th, but the trend was we saw a 1.3 bushel increase with the use of inoculants on these replicated large block on-farm locations. Not as big an increase as we saw with our small plot, but anytime you go and start putting stuff on larger areas in farm, you get a lot more variability across different conditions, and so we were pleased that we saw a 1.3. The range, we had some fields that saw a 6 to 7 bushel increase with the inoculants. I'm pretty hesitant on really making wholesale changes in any recommendation, but with the results we've seen with this inoculant, we're really kind of pushing it, especially for later planted soybeans. The question always comes up, what product? We looked at a number of different products and we saw no difference. It is a living bacteria, so it does have an expiration date. You don't want to have them sitting in your truck on a hot day because it's going to kill the bacteria. Probably the biggest thing is chlorinated water. When the applicators are applying the product, they need to make sure that they're not using chlorinated water because, of course, the chlorine is going to kill the bacteria and it's not going to be active. Once the seed is treated, most of the companies have on their website a recommended list of insecticide, fungicide, seed treatments. Just make sure you get, those products that are going to be compatible with the inoculants. The one thing that is not compatible is molybdenum or moly. For the nitrogen fixation process to occur, the bacteria need the molybdenum, but majority of our soils we have in the state have adequate, supplies of molybdenum. So then the next objective that we looked at in this project was looking at seed treatments and seeding rates. There's been a big push the last several years, and with some of the data coming out of the Mid-South entomology group, is that insecticide, fungicide seed treatments have been showing some really good, increases in yield. With this particular project, we wanted to look at, kind of where that break-even point would be if I didn't put on a seed treatment. How many more extra seed would I need to plant, to compensate for what I was losing, due to, either diseases, seedling diseases, or some kind of infestation with soil-borne insects. We looked at seeding rates from 50,000 up to 200,000. So for the last several years, had multiple locations. We tried to plant it as early as possible because we tend to see more problems with seedling diseases and insect issues, planted early. Some years, the weather didn't cooperate and we were a little bit later getting planted. But overall, when you look at the data, anything less than 75,000 seeds per acre, the insecticide fungicide was benefiting. We were seeing it, increase in the number of seedlings, up until about 75,000 seed per acre. Once we kind of broke over that, we really weren't seeing that big a difference with the plant populations with the seeding rates. And so I think it is that, if you're looking at some of these lower seeding rates in that, 100,000 or less, you definitely need to have a seed treatment on there to ensure that, you're going to have good stands. Anything over and above that, we still recommend a seeding rate, but you're probably not going to see the yield benefit like we have with those lower seeding rates. I've been on several calls in the last several years, especially with the wet, cool conditions we've had in the last couple of years, where farmers really struggled getting stands early in the season. And 9 times out of 10, you talk to them, where they're having these issues, and you ask, did you put on a seed treatment? And most of them was no. And so you may not see the benefit of a seed treatment every year, but it's going to be, that every 3 or 4 years where we have really cool wet conditions like we did in 2018, where you're going to see a benefit with that seed treatment. Just that 1 year, when you start to factor in additional seed costs and additional labor and additional equipment cost and wear and tear, it's really paying for that seed treatment. Initial reports of seed quality coming out of the State Plant Board is the seed quality is really going to be down in 2019. The germination scores are about 10 to 15 points lower than we typically like to see. And the ones that really bother me are the accelerated aging numbers. On average of the samples they've gotten so far, the average accelerated aging score is in 65%. And that's 15 to 20% lower than I'd really typically like to see it. And so with the accelerated aging and the poor germ that we're kind of starting to see, we need to add that seed treatment just to ensure that we can get some really good seed. And that's not to say, a seed treatment's not going to increase our germ, it's not going to increase your accelerated aging, but it's going to preserve what you currently got at the moment. Right.